it's for God's sake that all of the sparks that were embedded there, heavy, huge sparks, because there's such evil, there's such power, are now released. So it works for the Satan. He's tricked. For such a place, I'll let such a soul come in. And he keeps getting tricked time after time. It works for God because God needs a holy, intense soul there to extract those sparks. And it works for the soul as well on both levels. Again, you can't have, what soul is supposed to be the child of these parents, right? If you had a Terach and a Misley and they were Jewish. So what soul are you going to send there? A regular soul? Well, they're such bad people. I'll send a mediocre soul. It's a lost case. That's not fair. God only can give you what you can handle. So the only soul that can truly be the child in a very evil environment has to be the strongest soul. That's only fair for the soul. And we're about to really read the first encounter between Boaz and Ruth. I'm sure in popular literature, secular literature, when you read this without understanding what's really going on, it looks a little different. So I wanted to, before we even start reading, give some spiritual background to understand what was going on. So before we get into that, if you forgot the storyline, if you had a good reason not to be here last week, or you forgot because it's been a busy week, which it really has, packed week. So we have Ruth, who says, hey, Naomi, I'm going with you. Want me or not? We're stuck. I'm stuck to Judaism. I'm stuck to God. I'm stuck to you. So Ruth and Naomi come to Bethlehem, the main city of Judah, of Yehuda, in the time of the harvesting. They are dirt poor. They have nothing. Well, obviously, the only thing they had, which is important to remember for the storyline, is the ancestral lands, because they didn't lose that. They didn't sell it. They still have land, but land can't feed them. And what are they going to do with land now? It's not the time of the planting. It's the time of the harvesting. So they missed a whole season. So even though they have this land, which probably has value, it's not helping them at this moment. So they're still miserably poor and hungry. So what do you do if you're poor and hungry and a Jew in Israel? Well, the farmers have laws which incorporate feeding the poor. We have the corners of the fields we leave. We have, if we forgot grains, we don't go back to get them. And we have, when we gather certain sheaves, we leave certain parts of the sheaves. And all of this is built into the system, way before welfare or social services. So people have a way of eating, an honorable way, or at least a kosher way of having food. And Ruth said, I'm going to go. She is this Moabite princess. She said, I'm going to go because we don't have any food. I don't want you, Naomi, going for you. You're so much older. Not that Ruth was young. Again, remember, to put this in perspective. She was 40. She wasn't a 18-year-old girl. She wasn't a beautiful 18-year-old. She was a beautiful 40-year-old. She was 40. She said, she was a princess and she was 40, but like, Naomi, it's much more disgraceful for you. You know these people and you're so much older. I'm going to go. I'm going to get. And when she goes, she comes, as we're going to read, by the hand of God to the field of Boaz, who was the second closest relative to her deceased husband. We explained her, Ruth's father-in-law, Melech, had two brothers, Salmon and Tuv. Salmon has already passed away. He has one son, Boaz. And Tuv is still alive. Tuv is considered a closer relative. It was her deceased husband, Machlon's uncle. And the next relative in line is Boaz, Machlon's cousin. Boaz wasn't a little, person in the back of the synagogue, so to speak. He was the leader of the generation. He was the judge of the generation, a very honorable man, a very wealthy man from, again, this very illustrious lineage, as Elimelech had this very illustrious lineage that he said. Very interestingly, for various reasons that we mentioned last week, Boaz didn't reach out to help his relative. And it's not like there were so many relatives. For some say his wife just passed away. Some say other reasons. But now we see for the first time, Boaz actually sings, and we see what happens. And that's going to, of course, continue God's plot to lead ultimately to the culmination, the climax of this very, very special story. Story not meaning not true, story meaning this happening that was so special that it's embedded in our history, in our psyche, as the story of Ruth and Boaz. So before we read that, we want to understand what is going on here. Because to be honest, if you read this without knowing any commentary, it might not look so kosher. Even if it looks kosher-ish, Doesn't look not kosher, but it doesn't look like how things are supposed to look. And that's really the point. You could read the storyline and nothing wrong happened, even according to the most simple, very secularized reading, not as they might make it, but literally the words, nothing wrong happened between Ruth and Boaz. But it doesn't seem so kosher. It doesn't seem how it's supposed to be. What's going on? Boaz, this very old judge, Ruth, this Moabite convert, like what's going on? It seems like, and then Boaz dies the next morning. Like that really made everyone say like, whoa, this is obviously not kosher, which of course was the opposite of the truth. And actually we're told that God kept Boaz alive, that he really should have passed away. He was elderly, but God kept him alive to have this one night together with Ruth, from which ultimately would come King David, David HaMelech, and ultimately from there, Mashiach. So what's going on? So there's really two levels of understanding what's going on. And if we look at it, it's not only Ruth and Boaz. We see this pattern with God. We see this pattern of things that really don't look kosher or don't look so kosher, or you can learn a lot of sources and understand it was kosher, but still looks a little not like we would imagine things should look. So why is this? Well, let's go all the way back, because Ruth, of course, comes from a horrible nation. A nation we're told is so evil that God did not destroy them, only so Ruth should come out of them. And their cousin nation, Ammon, who are also told basically the same thing about. God would also have destroyed Ammon, such a wicked nation, but another very special convert and the wife of Solomon, wife of Shlomo HaMelech, came out of that nation. So let's go back to see all the weird stories. So again, first weird story that relates to this lineage is the origins of Moab and Ammon. Again, Moab, from which Ruth originated, and Ammon, from which Naamah, King David's son, Solomon, David HaMelech's son Shlomo, his wife, who again, hey, he had a lot of wives. Yeah, but this was the wife from which the royal lineage continued. Shlomo and Naamah produced Rechavam and thus continued the line of David until Mashiach. So it wasn't just another one of the many wives. So what happened there? What happened there was really horrible and ugly. Here we have Lot, who lived in Sodom, and God, in his enormous compassion, perhaps for him and for sure for Abraham, sends angels to save Lot and his wife and his children. He didn't have any sons. He had, at that point, 4 daughters, 2 married, 2 single. They all were supposed to be saved. Lot, his wife, his 2 single daughters, and the 2 men they were engaged to, his 2 married daughters and their husbands. Well, the married daughter's husband said, this is ridiculous. City's not going to be destroyed. There's nothing as solid as stone. It's this huge metropolis. And they laughed at Lot. So there went those 2 daughters with their husbands. The fiancés of his 2 daughters had the same reaction. So Lot and his wife and the 2 single daughters, again, everything is divine plot. They're the only ones that leave Sodom before it's destroyed, as actually it's being destroyed. And originally Lot went to the town nearby that was saved through Lot's bargaining with God, but then he was scared. It was just too close to Sodom. So he ran away to the mountains, to the hills, to a cave somewhere with his 2 daughters. And they thought the world was destroyed. Just as they knew happened before. I mean, God made a flood and destroyed all of mankind except some 8 people. So now God's overturning the earth. Here they see all the massive cities around them, massive for those days, were all destroyed like this. So I guess God destroyed the world one more time, and we are the survivors. Therefore, they decided that the only thing left to perpetuate mankind is for them to have relationships with their Father. And obviously, God was involved in this, because in this cave they ran to, lo and behold, there's nothing in the cave, but there's a bottle of wine. To get drunk, to have relationships with the older daughter the first night, and the younger daughter. And we say by the time the second night came around, Lot probably had a bit of a awareness what was going on, but he let it happen a second time. Definitely not the type of person you want around you or your children or anyone you would care about. So that's Lot and his daughters. And they each had a child. And that child wasn't just a child, it became the head of a whole nation. Moab and Ammon, 2 huge and obviously very evil nation, as you can imagine from their origins. Why did God let that happen? Or we might say, why did God make that happen? Something was going on here. And again, from Moab comes Ruth, and we know Ruth is coming from Moab because it's clearly written that Moab would have been destroyed, but God did not destroy Moab, so Ruth could come from Moab. Ammon would have been destroyed. God did not destroy Ammon, so Naamah could come from Ammon. So because of these two converts, Ruth from Moab and Naamah from Ammon, these two horrific nations that were very, very, very vicious to the Jewish people, whenever they had the opportunity, whenever the Jews sinned, as we discussed previously in this class, they were worth it. And they both are tied into the lineage of King David and of Mashiach. Ruth, great-grandmother of David, Naamah, wife of Shlomo, from whom produces, again, the Davidic line, the line of Mashiach. So why does God want this energy in his royal lineage? And then, of course, another incident that we have definitely discussed more than once, remember, at least twice, very much going into it, explaining to you what happened with Yehuda and Tamar. Judah and Tamar. Again, does not look too good. Not to go into the whole explanation and how it really was kosher. I know we've done that before. I just want to focus on what happened that looks so wrong. Where again, to remind you, Tamar is married first to the oldest son of Yehuda. God takes away his life because he was doing the very, very spiritually damaging sin of not consummating his relationships, not wanting his beautiful wife Tamar to become pregnant and lose her beauty. God said, nope, he's gone. Okay, well, there's a law called Yibum, which very much plays into the story of Ruth. We've touched on before. We will discuss extensively, not today. Yibum, Tamar, married the second son, of course. And then he's like, I'm going to get her pregnant, and then the kid's not really mine. It's my dead brother's. I don't want that. Why do I want such a child? I'd rather her not. Let her stay as she is, beautiful and without children. God said, you're doing the same sin with the second son. That was that was Onah. And Yehuda's like, I got one son left. This woman, clearly there's something about her that her husbands die. Something wrong going on here. She looks very holy. She looks very modest. She looks very righteous, but something cannot be right. I'm going to give her to my third and last son, Shelah. Well, he made some excuse and said, maybe go back to your father's house. And when Shelah's ready to get married, I'll let you know. And she's waiting and waiting. And she understands what's going on. And Yehuda's not planning on giving her Shelah. And she knew she's supposed to produce a child. She's creating this royal dynasty from Judah, from Yehuda. But she's never going to get Shelah. Yehuda's never going to do it. She sees that. So as we probably remember the story, she dresses herself up as if she's a prostitute, goes to a place where she knows Yehuda's going to be, and Yehuda passes by, and they have relationships from which twins are born, of which one of them, again, ultimately is the father of the line of David, the line of Mashiach. So we've already learned why Yehuda was allowed to do it according to law, but what really was going on? And we're told that when Yehuda walked by, he's not going to look at a prostitute again. Could have been kosher. He asked her many questions, to ascertain how kosher it was. But he's not going to have relations with a prostitute, even if it is allowed. And we're told that God sent the angel of lust. I don't know what the angel of lust looks like, but we can only imagine. The angel of lust to Yehuda, to Judah, and the angel said to Yehuda, so to speak, where are you going? You can't pass by this woman. Where are the kings going to come from? Where are the great men going to come from? And he pushed him, so to speak. He put all of his power of lust into him that he would turn and have relationships with this woman. Not only did Yehuda father his twins in this very apparently illicit manner, but it became a tremendous embarrassment because it became public knowledge. Because Yehuda, with a lot of moral courage, when he realized what happened, which of course was only after Tamar alluded to him what happened, he said, oh, actually, I was the one. Because, of course, as it continues in the Torah, suddenly Tamar's pregnant, and suddenly they're like, what's going on? Tamar's pregnant. She's supposed to be waiting for Shelah. Oh, all right, well, she's got to be killed. This is adultery. Or alluded to Yehuda, it wasn't adultery, it was with you. With you, it was permissible. With you, it's evil in the same way as it would be with Shayla. And Yehuda said, that's okay, you're right. That was kosher. And it was with me. I see the signs. And yeah, you know what? I confess. This was with me. He didn't say the angel of lust. I don't know if he knew that. He didn't, he just probably thought it was a really strange moment. What in the world was I thinking? Me? Why would I do something like that? I have no clue, but look what happened. But yes, it was with me. And actually, since it was with me, it was kosher. So what was God doing? Why did God do this way? What's going on? And then again, we have, of course, what we're going to be studying at length, the story of Ruth and Boaz. And Ruth is a Moabite convert, which in those days, people didn't even think a Moabite convert could marry a Jew. And then again, a nighttime visit, and then they get married, and then Boaz dies, and the stories continue. So all of this makes us feel like so uncomfortable. You know, you're going to David and Bathsheba. I mean, it continues. So uncomfortable. What's going on? There are many levels of understanding, again, the whole overarching concept of what's going on. You could take apart incident by incident. Incident by incident, you could show what was going on and the legitimacy of what was going on, but what was going on? So there's two broad levels of understanding what was going on. So I want to unpack each one. The first level, and then even more deeply, a much more Kabbalistic level of what was going on. So the first level of what was going on is understood basically with the term our sages use as the bribe for the Satan. Shochad lasatan. That sounds really weird. But we see this concept in the Talmud. You can almost envision it like yourself when, I mean, this is not a very good example of it, but like you would say, well, you know, I'll buy myself that dress after I lose 10 pounds. Meaning you're setting up a situation that isn't very logical. Or, you know, I'll eat the cake after I learn for 45 minutes. Well, what are you doing really? You're fooling yourself? I mean, you're not stupid. You know you're saying this to get yourself to learn. You know you're saying this to get yourself to lose weight. Like either just lose the weight, learn. What are you saying these things for? But somehow we have this ability to like fool ourselves, if you will. And really this stems from a spiritual ability to fool the Satan. Not to go into the details now, but before Rosh Hashanah, there are many things we do to fool the Satan. And you say, year after year, he still gets fooled by the same tricks. We're not originating anything. We're doing the same tricks they taught us at the time of the Talmud. So we're talking about over 1900 years and he still gets fooled? Yes, for many deep reasons that, again, it's not really the framework of this class. But yes, there is a concept of fooling the Satan. So what's the trick here? And how is all these bad-looking stories a trick? The trick is that every one of these stories, now again, Lot and his daughters was not a kosher story, but Lot and his daughters, yeah, where the Satan felt really good and a lot of evil got created in the world through that, which is true. Yehuda and Tamar, nothing was evil, but here we have Yehuda like publicly disgraced, Tamar, like so to speak, publicly disgraced, or something weird going on. A lot of people snickering about it. The Satan felt really good. Ruth and Boaz, a lot of people snickering about that one. The Satan feels really good. Here's Boaz. He's the leader of the generation. Boy, does he look bad. And again, David and Bathsheba, Shlomo and Nama. The stories continue. The bribe to the Satan, the trick for the Satan, the concept being when a very holy energy needs to come into this world, the forces of evil that we generically call the Satan are trying to not make it happen. No, that soul's not coming into the world. I don't let. You say, what do you mean you don't let? I mean, there's God. The Satan doesn't have any power over God. There's a system here. There's powers that are given here to, of course, create for us this thing called free choice. So within the realm of powers, the Satan has this power of saying, no, that soul's not coming down. He sneaks such a soul into the world. It's not only with souls and coming into the world. As I said, we do the same thing before Rosh Hashanah, but we're talking about this now, especially in our frame of reference. How do we sneak such a soul? How do you sneak past such a mega soul? By putting it in a place that seemingly is so filthy that the Satan says, sure, I don't mind. I'll go for that one. Now, this predates any of the stories we have. This actually is the roots of the Jewish people. Avraham Avinu. Avraham, one of the greatest souls of all times. I'm not to judge, but definitely I would say in the top 10 all time, was born to a couple that each one of them independently so arch evil. Those are the parents of Avraham Avinu. Bribe to the Satan, trick for the Satan. The Satan says, that soul is not coming in this world. I'm going to take all my powers and not let that soul in. God says, what if he goes there? Oh, there. Yeah, that's a good idea. Ha, 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 ha. God says, oh, you're laughing? We'll see. The embarrassment and disgrace of Yehuda and Tamar, wonderful. David and Bathsheba, amazing. And so we have the emergence of the line of David and Mashiach. Now, this again doesn't only apply there. It really applies in any situation. It applies today. This isn't only a concept of, thousands of years ago. Even today, a very holy soul sometimes is born to not very good parents. You might have seen this in your own world. If you're aware of people and their parents, and you're like, such parents have such a child? How is that possible? During the time of conception of a child, the thoughts of the parents are literally forming the garment around the soul of that child. The parents aren't generally, except for very great tzaddikim who can, but for the rest of us, the parents don't draw down a specific soul. But the parents determine the purity of the garment that soul will be encased in for its entire life. Obviously, a very evil people, let's go back to like Terach's parents, Avram's parents, Terach and Amisle. Terach, the pusher of idols in his world, and Amisle, her name means emes, lo. In other words, sheker, falseness, deceit. That's a name, that's her essence. So obviously, such parents do not have very holy thoughts in conceiving Abraham, in conceiving Abraham. So now, obviously, he was born with very filthy garments, but such a soul that he overcame them and managed to transform them. And even today, again, we have this pattern. Not always. You shouldn't think holy parents, so their kids are probably messed up. No, it doesn't mean that holy parents, good parents, godly parents are going to have low caliber souls as their children. It doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean that every low person is going to have a very godly soul within their children. But definitely the pattern continues. God still uses the same trick for the Satan. And it really works at every level, because we could say this is so not fair. Here you have a very holy soul, a very powerful soul, coming to a mother or a father or both who are not good people. Well, that's the only way the Satan will let such a soul come in this world. Seems so not fair to God, not fair to the soul. Okay, we're pacifying the Satan and we're tricking him because this soul's so great. The soul's going to overcome that background, as of course we've seen. And I mean, we could see this with people we know in our own lives. That still seems like a rough road. No, it all works out. The Satan's getting his bribe, he's getting his trick, but this is also from God's end, and this is also from the soul's end. God doesn't just do things so the Satan could be pacified and tricked. Why is this for God's end? Because when a person is put in a very rough space, in a space of a lot of evil, when that soul goes in there and emerges, all of the energy embedded in that space is released through this person's actions. At least let me just finish the thought and then I'll take a question. All of the energy, which of course goes back to like, why Ruth from Moab? Why Naamah from Ammon? Because they extracted the energy, that very potent, as we see, because it's very evil. Again, pendulum theory. If something's really evil, that means there's a lot of energy. We got to get it to the right way. So if a soul is put with parents that are not good people, or one of the parents are not a good person, and that child emerges, all of that energy there, which is very heavy energy because a lot of evil means a lot of energy, is extracted and released for God. And again, we see this today with Baal Teshuvas today. Some Baal Teshuvas come from such backgrounds. Their parents immerse themselves in Christianity, immerse themselves in cults, immerse themselves in so much evil. And when that child escapes this, it's not just, well, thank God this soul somehow got out. It's for God's sake that all of the sparks that were embedded there, heavy, huge sparks, because there's such evil, there's such power, are now released. So it works for the Satan. He's tricked. For such a place, I'll let such a soul come in. And he keeps getting tricked time after time. It works for God because God needs a holy, intense soul there to extract those sparks. And it works for the soul as well on both levels. Again, you can't have, well, what soul is supposed to be the child of these parents, right? If you had a Terachan and a Misle and they were Jewish. So what soul are you going to send there? A regular soul? Well, they're such bad people. I'll send a mediocre soul. It's a lost case. That's not fair. God only can give you what you can handle. So the only soul that can truly be the child in a very evil environment has to be the strongest soul. That's only fair for the soul. And also, because every one of us, even though we can say we're not coming down for the refinement of our soul because our souls are completely beyond perfect, but lifetime after lifetime, their muscles are more and more developed, their fields of expertise, everything they've acquired is happening lifetime by lifetime. Well, such a great soul put in such an environment with such challenges, like the challenges that only this soul can accomplish and can overcome, is also the challenges that are worthy of the muscles of this soul. If this soul went into just like a regular family, it's nice, it'd be easier, but it wouldn't be so difficult, and therefore it wouldn't be so challenging, and therefore it wouldn't be so developing to fulfill the needs of the soul as well. So for the Satan, this works. He gets fooled. That's why the soul comes into this world. For God, it works. He needs a super powerful soul in such an environment to extract the energy. And for the soul, it works. Because that's the only type of soul that can go in such an environment. And this is a type of environment that really propels the trajectory of that soul. Eliza.
Yeah, I'm just not understanding. In terms of our concept of what the Satan or this energy from the Sitra Achra is, I always understood that really this so-called Satan is like an employee of Hashem. That if Hashem, the king, didn't have some hired, dressed up like a prostitute at times, dressed up like a swindler or conniver at other times, to like try and trick the royal prince, then the royal prince wouldn't have those challenges to overcome. And that whatever the challenges that really this so-called Satan is like rooting for the prince to like discover and uncover and not be fooled.
Great question. You're absolutely right. I'm going to rephrase Elisa's question because it's a really good question, and I'll try to give an answer. I mean, I can give an answer. I hope it won't take too long. Elisa's like, wait a minute, I thought the Satan works for God. Well, what do we need to fool him for? What do we need to pacify him for? What do we need to trick him for? So you were alluding to the parable in the Zohar for the forces of evil, the prostitute. So I assume you know that parable because you were alluding to it.
Yes.
In the parable that Eliza was alluding to, this is a parable in the Zohar to understand. Let's just call it our Yetzer Hara, evil inclination, meaning our evil inclination, the angel of death, the Satan, it's all the same. It's all this godly energy. Angels, our evil inclination is an angel, like Eliza said, in God's employee, working for God. An angel doesn't have free will. An angel's not a free player. This is his mission. His mission is to mess us up. So the question is, focusing on Eliza's very good question. So here I have, I'm going to take it from a different angle, but I really am answering her. So here I have inside of me an angel. That sounds cool. Well, the angel is called my evil inclination. That doesn't sound so cool. So it's an angel and it's my evil inclination. Why is an angel my evil inclination? Well, what's it supposed to be? You know, it's a force. It works for God. It's in God's employee. It's an angel sent to do what? To get me to sin. Why would God want me to sin? God doesn't want me to sin. God does not want me to sin. But God wants me to be tempted to sin so I can overcome the temptation and thereby grow and thereby give to him and thereby change the world and thereby bring redemption. There's lots of good reasons why God wants me to be tempted, but God wants me to overcome. So he sends this angel to me, call my evil inclination, with a job that I should mess up. And the metaphor given is like the king who's hiring a prostitute to tempt his beloved son. So the son will not succumb. So the son will stay moral and of high caliber. And this will prove his worthiness to be the next king. So the question is, if your evil inclination is just an employee, it's an angel, how could he sincerely be trying to get you to mess up? God doesn't want you to mess up. He works for God. The funny position. Like, imagine if you somehow were in such a situation where you're supposed to try to get someone to mess up, but you really don't want them to mess up, but you want to try to get them to mess up, but you don't want them to mess up. Like, come on, it's a very fine line. And how in the world do you do it? So how does our evil inclination sincerely try for us to mess up when it works for God and it knows God doesn't want us to mess up? So that's the philosophical question. It's a very practical and interesting question that the Zohar is really answering with that metaphor of the king and the prince and the prostitute. Because as the Zohar expands on that metaphor, the Zohar explains, I'm going to say it in my own words, but this is straight from the Zohar. So there's this king, and he wants to test his son to prove that his son has high moral, noble character, so he's worthy to be the king. And he has to find a great prostitute who'll tempt him, to find the best prostitute in the country that could tempt his son. And he finds her, and he calls her into the palace. So here's a prostitute. I mean, she's a prostitute. And she's getting an invitation to go to the palace. Like, this is weird. Again, this king was not like, some person playing around like the kings of England, which if anyone's sort of hearing about the kings of England lately, and then you hear some of the history and it's like, well, they had lots of kids, but none of them were legitimate. So therefore, no, we're talking about a really noble king, like a Jewish king, an appropriate king for God. So what's a prostitute being invited to the palace? So she's like, oh my gosh, I'm coming to the palace. And she comes to the palace. And of course, there's a very private meeting between her and the king because he doesn't want the world to know about it. He doesn't want the son to know about the setup. And he tells her his whole situation. He needs something from her. He needs a favor from her. He needs her to tempt his son so his son can. So she's like, oh my gosh. Well, of course, the king, our noble king, our honorable king. I never thought I would ever be able to do anything for the king. Like, of course. I can't wait to help the king and tempt his son. Let me do some research, find out what the prince likes, where he hangs out, what colors of my clothing, but let me get all into it. And as she's trying to do a good job and do all the research to really tempt this prince, feeling very funny, very weird. It's like, what's going on? I'm trying so hard to tempt this prince. What happens if I succeed? I mean, I'm a really skilled prostitute. The prince is going to fail. The king will feel horrible. That's my king. That's my noble king. That's the king who I love and respect. And I'm working so hard because I'm so happy I can do something for him. And I'm going to hurt him like this? I don't want to do that. So what am I supposed to do? Not do what he asked me? He wants me to do this. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to do it? So what does she do? Smart woman that she was. She says, you know what? I have a friend. She's a really good prostitute. I'll explain the story to her. She didn't see the king. I was by the king. How could I hurt him like this? She was never by the king. Maybe she saw him in some parade from a tremendous distance. She'll be able to do it wholeheartedly. And that's what the king wants. So she passes the buck to her friend, tells the whole story, blah, blah, blah. We can imagine all the details. I don't want to take more time. And the second prostitute gets all into it. And then she has the same situation. She's like, my friend saw the king, and I'm going to do this to the king who my friend personally saw. Who sees the king? My friend saw the king. Like, your friend's neighbor's cousin won a lottery. Oh my gosh. Her friend saw the king. So she can't handle it. So she gets another prostitute. And the third prostitute, same story. My friend's friend literally was by the king. I can't hurt the king this way. But I'm supposed to. She gets a friend. Now the fourth woman didn't see the king. Her friend didn't see the king. Her friend's friend had a friend who was by the king. It's so far removed from her, she forgets the whole backstory. She just does her job to the utmost of her ability to tempt this prince. She's a prostitute. This is her job. And that is the metaphor of the Zohar that answers Elisa's question. In the highest spiritual realms, the Satan and our evil inclination, the angel of death, is all the same energy. Work for God. They're angels. But if they came into this world and they interacted with us on that level, they'd never be able to do their job properly because they don't want us to fail, because they don't want to hurt God that way. So what does God do? So just as in the metaphor, there's four prostitutes, there are four spiritual worlds. I mean, each world has myriads of layers, but in very broad strokes, there are four spiritual worlds. And as the angel that becomes my evil inclination goes through the four worlds until it enters me, it forgets. The worlds cover over its powers. So through the first world, like the first prostitute, the second world, the third world, the third prostitute, by the time it comes to the fourth world, which is a spiritual manifestation of our physical world, it forgot. It forgot the backstory. It deep buried inside of it, of course, it knows it's an angel and it has a job, but that's so remote. That was so long ago, spiritually, that angel inside of me, I can attest, is working very hard to mess me up. Has no compunctions, has no hesitations. Oh, I don't really want this person to sin. I don't really want to give God any pain. No, forgot the whole story. All it knows is its job. It wants to mess me over. And that's exactly what's happening here with the Satan, again, as the global energy of evil, of the evil inclination, of the angel of death. In its original source, it works for God. As it evolved to come into this world and interact with us, it forgets that backstory. It's completely invested in getting us to sin. And therefore, we need all of these strategies and working around to actually sneak such great souls into this world. But you can definitely see it historically, and I think you could definitely see it today. And I think this whole Baal Tshuva movement, where, again, not everyone, some people come from very nice backgrounds where it just happened to be that the parents didn't have Judaism in their life, but wonderful people of fine character. But some people come from really crazy stories, and a lot of evil and a lot of abuse and a lot of horrific energy, and such pure people emerge from there. And it's like, how is that possible? This is how it's possible. How did those parents have such a child? This is how it's possible. This is how. Lubavitcher Rebbe even says, which is sort of a similar, I mean, from a slightly different angle, but similar concept. The Rebbe says that when you, I'll put in the lexicon of Chabad, we'll say when you go on Mivtzayim, when you go to Manhattan to speak to someone and try to get them to put on tefillin or a woman to light the Shabbos candles, the Rebbe says, you shouldn't feel like, oh, wow, I'm so superior. You know, here I am with all of Judaism at my fingertips. And here's this Jew that knows nothing, you know, has no Judaism to his bank account, his repertoire, and I'm helping him and graciously giving him the gift of tefillin or of Shabbos candles. The Rebbe says, you should know, it might not be like that at all. It's very possible that these Jews you're meeting, they have very high souls. And therefore, God can put them in Manhattan. God can put them in a completely alien environment because they have the power to get out and to release those sparks. But you, maybe with your soul powers, God said, no, this soul I can't put in that environment. This soul would never be able to get out of such an environment. So this soul was born to a very, very safe place because that was the only place such a soul can handle. But those souls, they're really powerful. That's where they can go to that place. So I said that was the first level of understanding, which is very true. And now there's an even deeper level of understanding, which is much more, even more Kabbalistic than that one. And that's the idea of extracting the sparks. It says in the Midrash, in Bamidbar Rabbah, based on a pasuk in Eov, who can withdraw purity from impurity. So this is what it says. Abraham came from Terach, Chizkiah came from Achaz, Yoshia came from Ammon, Mordechai from Shimi, Israel from the nations, the world to come from this world. Who could do this? Who could command this? Who could decree this? No one but God, the only one. So that concept, as expressed in that Midrash, which of course is expanded upon very much in Kabbalistic writings and Hasidic writings, is that everything has energy. And as I was just saying, responding to Elisa's question, the greater the energy, the more we see its power. And very often these like arch villains of the Torah, of Tanakh, we're told Kabbalistically or in Hasidic teaching, have huge power, like all of them, like Lavan, like Paro, huge power. How do they have such huge power? Because they're such huge villains, because they're so evil. They're not evil like we understand. The evil of Paro is an evil we can't fathom. The evil of Lovin was an evil we can't fathom because they emerged from such enormous spiritual sources. And when that intense spiritual source devolved till it entered into this world, it came to be absolute evil. And that's still true today. As I said, these concepts aren't just concepts for the Tanakh books. Any arch villain of our times, if it's a Hitler, Yamach Shemo, can't fathom such evil either. A Bin Laden, a Saddam Hussein, I can guarantee you, they all come from very holy sources. Not that they're holy, they're horrible, they're evil beyond the word evil. Beyond our fathoming of evil is that evil. But again, they have to come from such a high source, because how else do they have such power? But this is a distortion of that source. This is that energy going in the wrong place, so to speak. So when we see in our world anything of power, anything of strength, we know it's coming from high spiritual energy. So if it's strength and godly, it's high spiritual energy in the appropriate vessel that's containing it. And if it's a lot of power in a very, very horrific manifestation, it's this high spiritual energy not contained in a godly fashion, like what Kabbalistically we call loose. So when we're looking at, going back to our situation, Ammon and Moab, such evil. As the nation started off with Lot and his daughters, and as the nation continued in that same road, such intense evil. Wow, there's a lot of power there. Right, God said. And that power we have to extract. We have to give to God. Tamar came from Canaan. Canaan is such evil. We're going to extract it. We're going to put that in the pot. So we have the energy of Canaan in the pot for Mashiach. We have the energy of Ammon in the pot for Mashiach. We have the energy of Moab in the pot for Mashiach. So situation by situation by situation, of course, it's not only the nations. I'm just picking that as an easy example because I know we're sort of running out of time. We could spend a lot more time developing this. Every evil situation, everything that these stories looked like, all those actions is such a hotbed of power, of evil, of negativity. We're going to go into that situation, but in a kosher fashion. And we're going to extract the spark. How could you make something like that kosher? God says, trust me, I'm very creative. Very creative. So we're going to extract that spark and put it in that melting pot. The melting pot for the line of David, the melting pot for the line of Mashiach. And again, this also happens in our life. Again, maybe you wouldn't see it. Maybe you weren't aware of it. Maybe it never happened to you personally or anyone you know. But sometimes we're also in situations that don't seem befitting for us. We somehow wound up in some situation. And it's like, why did God do that to me? I mean, I didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't a sin. But why was I in that situation? Why was I confronting that? Why was I dealing with that? Why did I get touched by that situation? Could be for this exact same reason. You went into the situation, you came out of it, and you took the energy with you. Like I was saying before about these souls, I think of Jewish children born to parents that are devout Christians. When they come out, what spark are they taking out? A spark of Christianity. Is that a huge spark? It's a mega huge spark. How do we know? Because look how much evil has been done in the name of Christianity. Look how much Jewish blood has been spilled in the name of Christianity. So the evil of Christianity, we can't fathom. You cannot fathom how evil it is. And when a Jew is in it and comes out of it, that spark is released. When a Jew came, when a convert's coming, each convert, as they come from whatever nation they're coming from, they're extracting the power of that nation and now investing it in the Jewish people. So on one level, every one of these things had to happen that looks so not too kosher, though it is kosher, but it doesn't look kosher, because that's how we could slip this soul in. The soul that's the soul that becomes the line of David, the line of Mashiach. And on an even deeper and concurrent level, both are working obviously simultaneously. We need to extract the spark and put it into the lineage of Mashiach. We need the heaviest sparks in the world. We need the greatest sparks, which means for many of them, we need what seems like the greatest evils of the world, because within those evils are such intense godly energies.